The biggest names in sports are all on IsraelSportsRadio.com.
From the AACI studios in downtown Tokyo, Jerusalem, it's Loose Live! Now here your host, me, Yossi G.
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone out there.
Another day.
Another day, another dollar, another shekel in this country. It's Lewis Live. We have a couple of great guests, couple of callers we'll be taking as well. But right now, we'll get to our first guest. Yossi G, please do the honors.
Live joining us from downtown New York, we are privileged to have with us Stan, the hockey maven Fischler, constant contributor to his blog on MSG.com and one of hockey's foremost historians. Stan, how are you?
I'm doing very well, Yossi.
Stan, let me ask you straight off the bat, last night was a very interesting night, to say the least. A coming out of sorts, if you may, that we finally saw the return of Sidney Crosby on the ice after a 10-month hiatus with the various post-concussion syndromes that he's been suffering from. What seems to be the buzz around the hockey world after the show, the display that he put up against the Islanders last night?
Well, first of all, it was fascinating to watch because, if nothing else, the whole Crosby issue was how would he react to being hit. And the Islanders went after him without any compunctions, and he shrugged them off. He was knocked flying a couple of times and never seemed to have any negative reaction. And, of course, what he did almost immediately was put on a demonstration of his vintage speed and shooting accuracy by scoring the first goal, which was a brilliant play. He beat an Islanders defenseman, Andy McDonald, sort of went around him and unleashed a backhand shot upper corner. I mean, you couldn't choreograph a better play than that. And, he starred throughout the game. The only quasi-minus was the fact that the Islanders used the kid goalie playing his first game, and in a cauldron like the Pittsburgh Arena, that was just tough scene for a kid to be in.
Did Sidney's return remind you at all of Mario Lemieux's return when he came back out of retirement in 2000 and scored a goal and had 2 assists in his first game back?
Well, the thing with Mario was that it was a different kind of situation because they're so different in personalities. Mario being a huge French-Canadian and a lower key guy, and there was less media attention than there was for this. I mean, this thing, some people said there were more media here than for the Stanley Cup Finals, and it sure looked like that. This one had as big a hype as anybody can imagine, and it topped the one with Mario. But the Penguins were facing a team that's in a tailspin, and as I said, the fact that they used a backup goalie really diminished Crosby's accomplishment.
Well, we'll get to the Islanders in just a minute, but last week we had an announcement with the Hockey Hall of Fame inducting 4 new members to Toronto's Shrine. What are your thoughts on Mark Howe, Gordie Howe's son, finally getting in?
Mark Howe is a guy who I've been lobbying for a long time, and I was appalled that he's been overlooked for so many years. Of the 4 guys who got admitted, only 2 belonged in the hall. Joe Newendike, definitely classy guy, terrific performer, and a cup winner. Doug Gilmour had no business going in. If anybody should have gone in, it would be Butch Goring. The difference being that Goring won 4 Stanley Cups, Gilmour only won 1. Goring won a Smythe Trophy, Gilmour did not, and how Goring has been overlooked is really a travesty as far as I'm concerned. And Ed Belfour was one of the nastiest, one of the most disliked, and the guy did a number of things that would disqualify him in just about any other place. But my feeling is that there is a Toronto bias, so that Gilmour and Belfour both played for the Leafs. and as a result, they get, it's a matter of favoritism. And I was on the selection committee for 2 years. I know how these guys work.
We're also hearing, with regards to the Phoenix Coyotes, that the possibility and likelihood of them moving, obviously a big if they are sold. What do you see happening with the Coyotes if they are sold? Will they actually end up moving out of Arizona?
Well, first of all, I was hoping that you would buy them, because then I could become either the GM or coach, but since you're not interested and you don't have the shekels, the whole thing right now, as I wrote in my newsletter, there's a quiet over the whole situation. That could mean that Gary Bevan, the NHL commissioner, is making what he likes to do, one of these 11th-hour attempts to save the thing, and he may not. He may not. And if he does not, it's going to be just like Winnipeg. They're set up in Quebec City. Quebec is ready to welcome the team. They got the dough there. They got everything in place that they had in Winnipeg. They'll immediately sell every ticket in 24 hours. 48 hours, they'll have a waiting list for tickets for season. It's a natural. So the league does not want to have another team in Canada if they can help it. But if you can't help it, then it's not like having a team in Pago Pago or Tahiti. So, it's not going to be the end of the world. By the way, have you ever been to Pago Pago?
Believe it or not, it has not happened yet. But I stress the yet.
Well, I hope you go there before an NHL team arrives.
Fair enough.
Laugh at some of my bad jokes.
Very nice. Stan, this is Ari Lewis. Thanks so much for being on Lewis Live tonight on Israel Sports Radio. I wanted to ask you regarding the Coyotes because I am originally from Arizona, and when the Coyotes made it to the playoffs, especially in the late 90s, it was a lot of fun. They had the whiteout. The crowd was very enthusiastic. Yes, it is a desert. Hockey is not so prevalent among the youth. But you figured there is something there, and Wayne Gretzky came in not too long ago. What exactly happened in Phoenix to cause this disaster where the team is now going to have to probably leave?
The disaster was Wayne Gretzky. First of all, they brought him in there as a figurehead. You don't bring Wayne Gretzky in to help a hockey team unless two things. One, he's still able to play at the top of his game, which of course he couldn't. He was retired. And secondly, if Wayne Gretzky was a brilliant coach, like, just for the sake of argument, like a Kenny Hitchcock, a guy who had some, Wayne Gretzky couldn't coach. He was a part-time coach. It was what we call in show business a build-up to a letdown. And since Gretzky couldn't coach and he wasn't really doing a good job, everybody became disenchanted. And that was the beginning of the end. Donnie Maloney came in, and he brought in a real good coach in Dave Tippett, and you see they're competitive now. So it's a shame because Phoenix had a hockey legacy. They had a very successful minor league team. My buddy Robbie Fatorik played for them way back when. And again, it's not irredeemable, but they have to find a sugar daddy in the next 2 months, otherwise it's going to be ach and vey.
Well, Stan, we mentioned earlier about the Islanders in a tailspin. What seems to have caused this? They got a new coach. They actually ended up hiring Capuano after the season last year. It seemed that they were on a little bit of a turnaround. They were playing really well towards the end of last season. What seems to be going wrong with the team?
Well, the easiest thing to say is that the guys who scored all the goals last year in the home stretch and that made them look so good, like guys like Grabner, Molson, Tavares, particularly a guy like Blake Como, and the comeback of Kyle Oposo was supposed to be a big booster. None of these guys, except for Tavares, is producing, really. So all you have to do if you're an opponent is key on Tavares, and you shut down the Islanders' gun, and what happens is what happened the last two games. They didn't score a single goal. So it's really up to the coach and his staff to figure out ways and means to get these guys to score as they did before. I mean, it wasn't an accident that Grabner scored more than 30 goals. They'd settle for 20 from him right now. Same thing with Molson. How and why a guy like Blake Como and a prospect like Josh Bailey just firing pop guns is a real tough thing to figure.
So what do you do in such a situation as a coach?
They're in a pickle because they have a long-term contract with their supposed number one goalie, Rick DiPietro, and yet in a big game like last night against Sidney Crosby and the Penguins, and they chose to start a rookie goalie in his first NHL game, that gives you pause, and you have to wonder what they're thinking. Because I am not Mandrake the magician, I cannot get into their heads and understand why they did what they did. You know, the answer to the Islanders' situation right now is beyond my really candid perception and conception. I'm not sure what to do. The goalie situation is right there. Yeah, they had 3 goalies. They were supposed to try to get it down to 2. They couldn't trade Nabokov because he got hurt. Then the backup goalie gets hurt, Montoya, so they were left with DiPietro. And DiPietro got shelled for 6 by Boston, so they bring the kid up. The kid didn't play badly, but you know he didn't have a very good defense. So it's really they have to make sure that I'm not the coach because I don't know what to do.
With regards to the league as a whole.
Let me add one thing.
Yes.
One thing. Last night in the telecast, the analyst, Butch Goring, pointed out that right now they have a lack of confidence. The assistant coach, Scott Allen, was on at the end of the second period, and he said very frankly on the air that the team is fragile now. They are mentally fragile. Pittsburgh, they played Pitt pretty good for the first 4 minutes. Pittsburgh then gets 2 goals, and the team, being fragile, falls apart. And they have to restore confidence. So how do you restore confidence? Well, you got to score goals. They played a terrific game against the Rangers a week ago, and that game was tied in the third period. The Islanders had every opportunity to win that hockey game, and Josh Bailey made a blind pass, unnecessarily blind pass, right up the middle, and bang, bang, Gabrick scores, and the Islanders lost the game. Now, that's the kind of thing that chips away at confidence.
Talking on the Rangers, one of the things that we have not heard so much about is the play and role of Sean Avery. Perhaps that is a good thing that he's keeping his name out of the news and leaving his play out on the ice. What have you seen from Avery this year different than in the past?
Well, for starters, Avery, when he was sent down to Hartford, was not expected to be back, I would say, within a month or maybe forever. He was sent down because the coach made it very clear, absolutely clear, that he didn't feel that Avery was good enough to make the team compared to the other guys that he had on the roster. Now, when John Tortorella says that, he means it.
Right.
Now, what happened was that a succession of injuries made it imperative that they fill the roster. So what was going to be a longer sentence in the minors for Avery turned out to be relatively short. Meantime, you've got a guy down in the minors, and he had an option to go to Europe and play. You have a guy down in the minors who suddenly says, gee, I don't want to be riding the buses every time. I want the good life. So he was chastened, and there's a word for that. You know what the word is? It begins with a P, and that word is penitent. And I got to tell you something. If anybody learned the meaning of penitent, it was Avery. He knew that he had to play Tortorella's way or forget about it. And he came back, and he's been chastened. He knows now that this is it, and he's playing a more disciplined, solid game. The difference is that Tortorella doesn't look at him as anybody's idol. He looks at him as another hockey player. And Avery is one of the most popular guys in the team, so there's a conflict of perception.
Now, before we let you go here, just your last thought. Florida or Toronto, which team has been more surprising thus far this season?
Florida. because unlike Toronto, the Leafs are in the news every day big time because there is a legion of media following them around, and it's just the opposite in Florida. So we're not hearing as much, but now they came from behind a 3-goal deficit to beat the Devils last night. It was considered one of the greatest wins in the franchise history, and they've got a good team, and that's what I like.
Stan, we know that you always has a good joke on hand. Would you like to share one with our listeners?
Yes, it's the world's shortest joke. Okay, a skeleton walks into a bar, goes up to the bartender and says, "Give me a beer and a mop."
Oh, Stan.
And if you don't like that one, a horse goes into the bar and the bartender looks at the horse and says, "Why the long face?"
Stan, you never cease to amaze, you never seems to enthuse, and you always crack a smile on those who listen to you. Stan, thank you so much for joining us here on Lewis Live. It's always a pleasure.
Anytime, and good luck and good health to all of you, and of course my favorite state of Israel.
Thank you,
Thanks, Stan. Have a good one.
Bye.